I'm leaning towards staff recommendation, and if you look at item 2 of their recommendations on page 2-2, it doesn't talk about just sending it out to the Ag Tourism Work Group. It talks about all of their interested groups for comments. In Ms. Null's presentation, she talked about sending it back to all the advisory groups and any other interested parties so we could get more input on this. And so hopefully that will rest that concern. Okay. My other comment I'd like to make is about the interpretation of the wineries and how they're treated a little bit differently, and how they've made the case for better or worse. It is all about interpretation, and we did hear testimony here today that whatever we do, just don't interpret it to the detriment of the property owners. And it's not, and it takes me back to this about commercial events related to the on-site agricultural production that's there. What I'm hearing, not only here today but out in the community, is that a lot of the agriculturalists are looking for ways to supplement their income so that they can maintain their primary agricultural use. If we stick with the size and scope, or size and scale, then I don't really see anything that wrong with allowing some commercial events that aren't necessarily related to the on-site activities. If it, we have difficult economic times, and in a way I think that is supporting agriculture because it allows them to supplement their income. We heard some testimony here today about a gentleman, he just makes enough doing some events to pay his property taxes, and so that's kind of where I'm going, but maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe we'll look at it differently after we send it back and get more input.
Well, I think it's important that we make a distinction between supporting agriculture and supporting owners of agriculturally zoned land. I mean, I would love to be able to have I'd love to be able to do activities on my property that cover my property taxes too, but I don't think it's my right to do that, and I don't think it's the county's obligation to ensure that my property taxes will be covered by, the activities that are allowed on my lands. Are we pursuing policies that are supportive of the long-term continuation of agriculture, which is the production of food, fiber, and flowers, or are we pursuing policies that are supportive of an individual landowner's personal bottom line?
I hear you, and I agree. I agree that it's the primary concern is supporting the agriculture, but what I'm hearing out in the community and here today is it's a way to supplement, because they're struggling right now. It's difficult times, not just for everybody, it's especially difficult times for farmers and ranchers. Yeah. And they're trying to supplement their income so that they can maintain a viable agricultural production.
I just want to jump in, though, because I think this is kind of really the crux of our conflict here. It's this. I think a lot of these other matters we can deal with, the nonprofits we want to protect, and this is it. Whether we want to allow these commercial operations on agricultural parcels. And that's it. And I think that argument can be made both ways, because you've very well stated the argument on the one side. The other hand argument is that allowance of the commercial activities raises the cost or the value of the land, and then prohibits agriculturalists then from getting the land, because the value is upped in costs then of entry. So the long-term agricultural production then, or productive capacity, is lessened because suddenly the value of the land is upped by the commercial capacity. So that's, you can argue it either way.
Could I respond?
Yep,
because
please.
I agree. I agree with
talking
everything
about.
that you just said, but the Ag Commissioner's Office stated that they have their procedures that keep it in perspective, that keep it in scope and scale, and that's a very important element of what your concern is. As long as it's kept to a minimal size and scale, then the dollar amount may not matter. It's just that the primary use is maintained as agriculture.
Except the Ag Commissioner's Office didn't say that, actually. They said this document that they handed out was how they determine whether an activity is secondary and incidental by their interpretation of secondary and incidental, and it's basically limiting it to the geographical area. The question of what's an appropriate size and scale of use is not up to the Ag Commissioner hasn't been opining individually on those things. That's what's being left up to the policymakers, and
Maybe I'm not making myself clear. I don't know how I differed in my statements with that. What I was trying to say is geographically sized, so that the majority of the property is used for agriculture.
Right, it's just, that's the distinction is, though, the Ag Commissioner's Office is talking about geographical size,
Right.
so 5% or 10% of the land amount. Well, it's, value is in there as a distinction that Mr. Eisensee specifically said they're not looking at. And if the scale of your operation, suddenly you're making $500,000 on the commercial activities, and the ag is only making you some fraction of that, even though the amount of land used for the commercial activity is less, the scale of your operation then has turned much more to the commercial activity, and that's where you get the upping of the value of the land based on that commercial capacity as not the ag capacity.
But if
I would also argue that at that point, agriculture essentially becomes a backdrop to your commercial activities.
then it's not secondary and incidental.
Right, but
Well, it is.
but they're not accounting. There's
though.
no accounting for
Yeah.
that, and that's just exactly where we have the
Yeah.
problem, and this discretionary
Right.
process to haggle through this.
Right.
Because we don't know. So is that it's only 5% of the land area, sure, okay. So, but it's 20% of the or 200% of the income.
Well, I would assume in the permitting process that it's determined that there's an ongoing viable ag production to allow any kind of events, so that there's assurance that they do remain secondary and incidental.
Well, right, so on that parcel,
But there
then,
isn't. There isn't.
Well, that's something we need to work on then.
I mean,
well, and that's the question, because I completely, at some level, I agree with you. If the scale is minimal and it's a huge parcel and there's agricultural operation, I agree with you, it's kind of a non-issue. So what if they hold a few weddings and rent out the barn? But on another level then, if the value of that property goes up and the wedding business is so successful that it dwarfs the agricultural operation.
And again, then it's a violation of the spirit of the secondary and incidental.
Right, but then we're not in a position to police that or enforce it. We've let land values go up, and we've let the spirit of what we say we want to do, which the policy
Well, that's a whole nother
wants
topic
to
that we
do.
heard evidence on with these budgetary times with the county talking about layoffs. We may not be in the position to enforce anything.
Well, that's exactly it, because we've let these things slip through, and suddenly it's working and the agriculture isn't, and we've missed the opportunity, because we can't enforce it once we've opened these doors. And suddenly it's not secondary and incidental, but we have no recourse.